Thank you all so much for coming back after the short break. Today we're going to talk about how we secure actual benefits for Oakland's creative and cultural communities, not just in word, but in deed. Next slide. So I'll be walking us through a roadmap to ensure that the Henry J. Kaiser Center for the Arts truly serves Oakland's communities, grounded in equity and accountability. And I'm also excited to introduce the Taproot Institute, which is our next chapter in community organizing. Next slide. All right, so the Henry J. Kaiser Center for the Arts, it's a historic public complex located right by Lake Merritt in Oakland. It's built in 1914. It's about 250,000 square feet of use. And it's long been an anchor for arts, culture, and civic life in the city. Just a quick definition, because I'll be talking about them a lot. A community benefits agreement, or a CBA, is a legally binding contract between a developer and community groups. So unlike traditional development deals, CBA goes beyond consultation. It's negotiated directly with impacted communities, and it spells out real, specific benefits that they receive from a project. So that these might include job opportunities, affordable space, funding, or support for local programs. In exchange, community groups may agree to support or not oppose a project. So CBAs hold developers accountable and ensure that the whole development process is more equitable, transparent, and responsive to local needs. So the CBA that we're going to talk about today was signed in December 2020, and there are two main signatories: Orton Development, Inc., which is Eddie Orton, the developer of over 25 million square feet of projects across the United States, Europe, and New Zealand. So that one big bank. Black Arts Movement and Black Arts Movement District Community Development Corporation, or BAM-CDC. And that's Dr. Ayadele and Zinga that I've been working with on that. And they are based out of BAM House in Oakland. Next slide. So the CBA between Orton Development, Inc. and BAM-CDC has been at risk. So this isn't just a paperwork snafu. It has tangible impacts on the Black Arts Movement District, Oakland's Chinatown, and everyone who's been fighting to make Oakland's cultural life vibrant and inclusive. So we're talking about neighborhoods, creativity, and legacy. Next slide. If the agreement falls through the cracks, it's Oakland's low-income Black, Indigenous, and artists of color who are going to be hardest hit. So we're not just talking about dollars and cents, but what it means to belong in Oakland, to shape Oakland's story, and to keep creative spaces in the right hands. Next slide. So CBAs are fully enforceable contracts, but enforcement only means something if there's consistent drive, engagement, and enough resources, money and time, from all parties to see them through. Real success takes a coalition demanding more than a bare minimum. That includes clear expectations, accountability, and definitely a process with teeth. Next slide. So what's currently happening? Up until last week, we were still facing real challenges. Progress was halted. There was no concrete steps on equity space. ODI wasn't following through on some of the critical commitments, and the communication with the Community Advisory Board had all but dried up. But as of July 17th, I'm really happy to report that we began substantive conversations with ODI. So we're discussing exactly which items need renegotiation, and maybe just as important, how to word the CBA so it's clear and doable for everyone involved. So no more confusion and no more loopholes. So this is a significant step in the right direction that we should build on, and we're hopeful that once again we'll wrap this renegotiation, and then meetings with the Community Advisory Board will begin again. Next slide. All right, why public policy? Policy isn't just a line in the sand, it's our letter. Even with new negotiations underway, robust public policy creates the framework to make CBA standard. It ties them to city agreements, and it gives community groups the support they need when things get tricky. So this recent progress proves that change is possible, but we need stronger policy to lock it in for the long run. Next slide. So our immediate focus is to keep ODI at the table, working closely with us on targeted CBA revisions. That includes more visible equity spaces, affordable rents artists can actually pay, clear and broader definitions, fair event pricing, real transparency, and a structure that will allow for the work to endure. So these are going to be our foundation stones for equitable redevelopment. Short term, it's all about urgency and backbone. Relaunching Voices, a group of over 40 arts and culture organizations in Oakland, preparing a community pressure campaign, and updating the equity report will keep the momentum going. Legal action remains an option if things stall. So we're not losing sight of accountability, even as the tone with ODI has become more constructive in the last few weeks. Next slide. Longer term, we have to outmaneuver legal hurdles like the Nolan-Dolan Supreme Court rulings. Cities are limited by state and federal law, most notably the Nolan-Dolan Supreme Court decisions, which say that requirements must be reasonably related and proportional to a development's impact. So cities can't demand benefits unrelated to project impacts as a condition of approval. So this is why CBAs are often privately negotiated and then embedded in public agreements or contracts. It's a legal entrant that ensures benefits without running afoul of those legal limits. And that's why codifying CBAs in city and state laws is key, and why we're drawing on what's worked in LA, New Jersey, and beyond. So we don't want the work vulnerable to shifting priorities. Here's what progress looks like. ODI doesn't just return, but it stays at the table. Community recommendations are integrated into the CBA. Media and public support are grown from the bottom up. A Voices group with real energy has relaunched, and new policy coalitions begin to move forward. Next slide. Introducing the Taproot Institute. All right, so through all of this work, it became clear that Oakland and cities like it need tools and support to make CBAs work for everyone. That's why we're launching the Taproot Institute, to become a central resource for powerful, well-equipped community coalitions and advocates who want to make CBAs not just possible, but successful for everyone. Next slide. Taproot Institute is about making it practical for every grassroots organization to gain traction. Workshops, templates, technical support, lowering the barriers so all groups, not just the ones with resources or legal help, can be strong negotiators for the communities. It will also have an advisory board composed of arts-aligned lawyers who specialize in CBAs, developers or folks who work with community development organizations, and artists who have previously worked in and around CBAs. Rashida, we're going to talk after. You like talking to you. For this to work citywide and beyond, Taproot Institute aims to keep policymakers aligned with community priorities. Forums, clear guidance, policy advocacy, these are the tools that we're going to use to build a steady drumbeat for equity in every deal. So Taproot Institute isn't just local. We want this framework, capacity, collaboration, policy change to serve as a best practice model for the Bay Area and across the country. Affordable homes, equity wages, inclusive cultural development. So this approach is meant to travel. To get our work started and deliver resources, workshops, and support to coalitions, we'll need an initial budget of $25,000 to launch Taproot's programs and operations effectively. Next slide. So advocacy for community benefits at the Kaiser Center hasn't been a one-time event. This work has been happening, it is happening, it will continue to happen as the project evolves. Our advocacy targets reflect this ongoing commitment, and we're consistently engaging Orton Development, city officials, relevant public agencies, and of course, the broader coalition of local arts, community, and neighborhood groups. So this persistent engagement is what secured the first CBA, shaped negotiations, and kept equity and affordability in focus even as circumstances changed. The same approach ensures that our voices remain part of every decision, from monitoring implementation to pushing for improvements and accountability down the line. Our advocacy is never just reactive, it's a living process, adapting, organizing, and building the relationships we need to keep community benefits at the center of both current negotiations and future opportunities. And that includes our relationships with ODI representatives who are, at the end of the day, also just people. Orton Development, next slide. Orton Development, through the LDDA with the city, holds primary legal responsibility for delivering those benefits. BAM CDC, as the signatory to the CBA and community partner, helps monitor, advocate, and implement. And our strategy is to keep both parties accountable in the process. At the same time, the city wields indirect leverage through its approval, monitoring, and enforcement roles under the LDDA. Combined with public, political, and media pressure, the ecosystem of accountability is where our grassroots energy and coalition power can maximize influence and ensure that the CBA's promises translate into real community benefits. And BAM CDC also holds 25% of the board seats of the Calvin Simmons Theater, which is the nonprofit body that's going to be taking over the entire project. So our strength is by coalition, by connecting local, regional, and state organizations, from those rooted in housing and culture to those driving statewide policy. We're ensuring this approach isn't built on any single organization, but on a broad, resilient network. And you can see these are just some of the folks that we have worked with and are working with. Next. So we're bringing an entire toolkit, organizing in arts-based actions, data-driven reporting, public campaigns, and legal research. With the right resources, staff, and communications in place, we can sustain and scale the work. So even as Oakland faces tough budget realities, community appetite for change and supportive leadership are on our side. Robust monitoring and enforcement are a key to making sure that commitments don't just stay on paper. Effective CBAs often include independent third-party monitoring or oversight committees with community representation, which improve transparency and trust. So along with BAM CDC, the Taproot Institute, as an emerging advocacy and capacity building body, is poised to support this monitoring work by helping to gather data, facilitate reporting, and provide technical assistance for independent oversight. So on a final note, as we close, I just want to emphasize how transformative community benefits agreements can be, especially for those of us in the arts and culture advocacy world. CBAs are more than just contracts. They are practical, legally binding tools that can secure affordable housing, jobs, community facilities, and equitable economic development for neighborhoods that often risk being overlooked or pushed out. But the real magic of CBAs is in the process. They create a seat at the table for those who love and shape their cities. When done well, CBAs not only bring concrete resources like rehearsal space, local hiring, or arts funding, they also ignite broader participation and engagement around redevelopment decisions. So for our arts communities, there's a huge opportunity. We can become better educated on using CBAs, not as the only tool in our advocacy toolkit, but as a powerful and proven way to make sure the places we care about don't lose the creative heart as they grow. So here in Oakland and across the country, advocates have the chance to lead by example, making sure that arts and cultural voices are always part of development conversations, and then negotiated benefits don't just sound good on paper, but they show up in bricks, mortar, opportunities, and equity. So with that, let's keep advocating so that CBAs become the rule, not the exception, in how our cities are built.
Questions, comments? I've got the microphone for you. Diane Sanchez had it up first. Natalia will come back to you.
Okay, so this may be a question that we should discuss later, but my experience with this was it was difficult to find someone in the city of Oakland who actually had the responsibility for staying in touch with Orton and monitoring from the city side, the CBA. And so in your work, where do you think that kind of thing should sit?
So that's a great question. Kelly Kahn in the city has been really, really helpful in this process. We've been in constant conversation and back channeling those conversations.
But it didn't seem, I mean, Kelly was great and I got a lot of information. There didn't seem to be anyone on city council or out of the mayor's office or anything that was monitoring this the way they were when they put when they awarded it to Orton, which was quite a contentious process.
Yeah.
For those of us who remember it. And so I'm just wondering with this, because these processes and these developments take a long time. Developers want to come in, develop, and then come out of it like with a board and they get out. What I saw Orton offering, and they wanted a board to come together, but taking on a huge lift of money that they would have to raise in order to make that happen. And it just didn't seem like anybody from the city side was really negotiating with them.
Yeah, I would say too that the other person that's been really instrumental and still holds that accountability piece that you're talking about is Julian Gross. who's the city attorney, right? And so Julian Gross was originally involved in the first framing of the CBA as it stands, and has since moved into the city itself. So Julian Gross and Kelly Kahn have been the main two advocates in the city, I would say.
So now they are in process of helping Orton work their way out of the 99-year lease to give it back to a nonprofit that then would take it over?
So ODI remains committed to the CBA that it's a signatory to. Built into the CBA, though, is that depending on, it doesn't matter who it changes to. If it changes to the Calvin Simmons Theater nonprofit, which is what's happening, ODI is still responsible as a signatory to the CBA. So that's kind of built into the CBA. They can change the name, they can do whatever they'd like, but it's still the same body that's accountable. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk more. For sure.
Thank you, Diane. Denise Sanchez.
Hello, Natalia Vigil, she, her. My question is more of a personal reflection question for you. It's just been amazing to hear these presentations and to know you all are artists, advocates, organizers, and to see you bridging everything that you are into this one place. So I just was curious what brought you to this focus with CBAs and just a little bit more about who you are and your motivations there.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I was born in California, but I came back to Oakland, to California in 2013, and I brought Nomadic Press with me, which I started over in Brooklyn. And so we spent a lot of time and energy publishing a lot of the voices, particularly in Oakland, but sort of across the Bay. And obviously in a lot of those conversations, with the writers that we had published, we found that they were getting displaced and pushed out. We were looking for affordable space to do events in and finding that difficult. So I would say that's probably some of the beginning seeds of that interest. I also am fascinated by the building itself. And I feel like it's could be such a crown jewel of Oakland's creative ecosystem if done in the right way. So I sort of have a vested interest there too. And I also work closely with Dr. Nzinga with BAM CDC. So that was kind of my official tie-in to that project. So Dr. Nzinga and I have been working really closely since about May or June of last year. But she's been holding this work for longer than that. She was one of the first folks involved in that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, you're welcome.
Right.
Troublemaker here in the yellow.
Robert. That's the problem when you arrive late and they put you in the front row. So a couple of comments. I think this is a wonderful, complex situation, and I applaud you walking down this path. But I kind of point out to follow up on Diane's comment. One of the deficiencies is obviously Oakland doesn't have any policy around its cultural facilities. Not only the Kaiser, the Oakland Museum, Fairyland, Port Altahassee, they're all facilities on city-owned properties. So there's that first deficiency, Malanga being the worst fuck up. So excuse my language, but I want to give a shout out to Rainin, who's had a commitment to look at cultural spaces over a long period of time. So that's just sort of, but inside City Hall, real estate, land use policy, it's just like all messed up. So somebody needs to sort of be given that homework assignment. But I guess now I get a little poetic, my friend, about the will, power. There's public will, there's political will, and there's poetic will. So meaning like, how do you organize those different wills to get what you want? The poetic will is not deficient in our city, in Oakland. All the artists, all that list is part of poetic will. But elected officials, Don't even get me going. But public will is really a community organizing. That's it.
Thank you, Roberto.
All right. Well, no. Other comments and questions. I just didn't know if you were responding poetic will. I mean, that's like your lane too. Folks are yes. Oh, all right. Yes.
This is so great, and I love to see your approach in tackling something so specific in this realm. There's so many directions that you could go in, and I think CBAs are really interesting as a tool. And obviously, CBAs can be used for many different communities, and I think the focus on the arts is really important. And I'm wondering if you've thought about CBAs and kind of the cross-sectoral approach, and if there's opportunity to be even more catalytic with more community benefit-centric sectors in this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the advisory board portion of the Taproot Institute is really where it's at for me. That's where my energy's at. So I'm thinking about folks like Rashida. I'm thinking about folks like Hope Moore. I'm thinking about folks like Julian Gross, who are going to bring varying perspectives to this issue of community benefits. And I love the cross-cultural, cross-sector approach. It's really, walking into this last year, the complexities of trying to navigate a 29-page CBA and all of its legal implications, it was mind-boggling. And that's nothing to say about the whole process that went into the actual creation of the CBA, right? All the negotiations. So even just to get close to getting to the table, there's so many resources involved in that, money and time in particular. And so this institute is really about trying to bring together the folks who already are doing this work, they know this work, and they're able to bring that kind of cross-sector viewpoint to it so that we can take on these issues and give people the resources from the get so that they can enter into these conversations with a step forward, right? So, yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for the work, JK, and sticking with it because it's tough. And I guess my question is, CBAs are a double-edged sword. They're really different in different contexts, and I think actually maybe the city of San Francisco actually gets involved with having templates and things for community benefit agreements, which the city of Oakland does not touch with a 10-foot pole. And there's different reasons for that, right? Because of the way developer incentives are and it's very complicated. So I'm just kind of curious about, and yes, there isn't enough information, and it is very sort of locale specific. And I'm wondering about starting like the Taproot Institute. I'm curious about starting that and sort of what the catchment area it could actually serve, and sort of given that there are places I don't know about Selk and what it might do in this area, and also maybe community vision and stuff like that. So just like the thinking behind like you need to start a new kind of entity. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's because I just haven't seen that in navigating this process myself and talking to others who've been in this. There's elements of it in different organizations, but to bring in the cross-sector again, there's not one house with that sort of cross-sector viewpoint. So at least in the Bay, I have not come across an organization that sort of contains all of that and is specific to community benefits agreements. I really want to stay on community benefits agreements, at least in the beginning. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, JK. Please, a round of applause, JK Fowler. Wow.